This slide illustrates the spinal cord, the spinal nerve roots, and the major muscle groups supplied by each spinal segment. The spinal cord serves as the communication pathway between the brain and rest of the body, transmitting both motor and sensory signals. So spinal cord transmits both motor signals as well as sensory signals. On the left is the vertebral column with spinal cord segments. So here on the left you can see the vertebral column with spinal cord segments. There are 8 cervical nerves, 12 thoracic nerves, 5 lumbar nerves, 5 sacral nerves and 1 coccygeal nerve. So how many cervical nerves are there? 8. Thoracic nerves are 12, lumbar nerves are 5 and sacral nerves are 5 and 1 coccygeal nerve. So each spinal nerve supplies specific muscles in a segmental or metameric pattern. So each spinal nerve, this supplies the specific muscles in a segmental or metameric pattern. The central figure, it shows a three-dimensional view of the spinal cord with its spinal nerve roots. The spinal cord contains centrally located gray matter surrounded by white matter. So the spinal cord, centrally located gray matter surrounded by white matter. From each spinal segment arise dorsal roots carrying sensory fibers and ventral roots carrying motor fibers. So here you can see dorsal roots carrying the sensory fibers and ventral roots carrying the motor fibers. So these unite to form a mixed spinal nerve before dividing into peripheral branches. So dorsal roots, ventral roots, it will form a mixed spinal nerve before dividing into peripheral branches. The cervical segments from C1 to C8 supply the neck muscles and contribute to the diaphragm through the phrenic nerve, mainly arising from C3 to C5. The cervical segments from C1 to C8, they supply the neck muscles and contribute to the diaphragm through the phrenic nerve. So this mainly arises from C3 to C5. They also innervate the muscles of the shoulder, arm and hand, enabling upper limb movement. So from C5 to T1, it innervates the shoulder, arm and hand, enabling the upper limb movements. The thoracic segments T1 to T12, they supply the intercostal muscles, abdominal wall muscles and the muscles of the back. The thoracic segments T1 to T12, this supplies the intercostal muscles, abdominal wall muscles and the muscles of the back. So these muscles are essential for respiration, trunk stability and posture. Thoracic segments are responsible for respiration, trunk stability and posture. Lumbar segments L1 to L5, they innervate the L1 to L5 lumbar segments. They innervate the hip flexors, anterior and medial thigh muscles and several muscles of the leg, playing a crucial role in standing, walking and lower limb movement. So lumbar segments L1 to L5, they supply the lower limbs, innervate the hip flexors, anterior and medial thigh muscles and several muscles of the leg. The sacral segments S1 to S5, they supply the posterior thigh muscles, muscles of the leg and foot and also provide autonomic innervation to the bowel, bladder and sexual organs, making them vital for both locomotion and pelvic organ function. Sacral segments S1 to S5, they supply the posterior thigh muscles, muscles of the leg and foot and also provide autonomic innervation to the bowel, bladder and sexual organs, making them vital for both locomotion and pelvic organ function. The panel on the right summarizes the key functions of the spinal cord. So it receives sensory input from the body, sends motor commands to skeletal muscles, coordinates voluntary movements and regulates autonomic functions such as bowel, bladder, and sexual function. So, spinal cord, it is receiving the sensory input from the body, sends motor commands to the skeletal muscles, coordinates voluntary movements, and regulates autonomic functions such as bowel, bladder, and sexual function. And finally, the insert at the bottom right demonstrates the structure of a spinal nerve. So it is showing the dorsal root carrying sensory fibers, the dorsal root ganglion containing sensory neuron cell bodies, the ventral root carrying motor fibers and their union to form a mixed spinal nerve. Ventral root, motor fibers, dorsal root ganglion containing sensory neuron cell bodies, dorsal root carrying sensory fibers. So, together these structures ensure efficient communication between the central nervous system and the peripheral tissues.